Hidden in the quiet landscape of western Indiana stands a prison that rarely appears in headlines, yet carries one of the darkest reputations in the American correctional system. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute was deliberately built in western Indiana, a region chosen not for convenience, but for control. Surrounded by open land and limited urban development, the prison's location reduces civilian presence and outside interference. This geographical isolation plays a critical role in security, making unauthorized access, surveillance by outsiders, or coordinated escape attempts extremely difficult. The surrounding emptiness becomes an invisible barrier, reinforcing the prison's physical defenses. Indiana's central position within the United States also gives USP Terre Haute a strategic logistical advantage. Federal authorities can transfer inmates from almost any part of the country with relative efficiency. High-risk prisoners, often moved under heavy guard, require secure transportation routes that minimize exposure. Terre Haute's access to highways and controlled transport corridors allows discreet and heavily protected inmate transfers without drawing public attention. The climate of the region further supports the prison's security framework. Harsh winters and unpredictable weather conditions act as natural deterrents to escape attempts. Cold temperatures, snow-covered terrain, and long nights make survival outside the facility nearly impossible for an escaped inmate. These environmental factors silently support the prison's mission of containment and control. The distance from major metropolitan centers is intentional. By placing the prison away from dense populations, the risk of large-scale disturbances, protests, or rescue attempts is significantly reduced. This separation ensures that even in the event of internal unrest, the impact remains contained, protecting both the public and federal personnel. The location also allows the Bureau of Prisons to maintain secrecy and operational privacy. Execution procedures, high-security movements, and sensitive inmate housing can be conducted with minimal media intrusion. This isolation enables federal authorities to carry out some of the most controversial aspects of the justice system behind layers of distance and discretion. From a psychological perspective, the remote setting affects inmates deeply. Being housed far from family, familiar environments, and major cities intensifies feelings of isolation and abandonment. The absence of recognizable landmarks or nearby communities reinforces the sense that this prison exists outside normal society, designed solely for confinement. The surrounding infrastructure is built with security in mind. Roads leading to the facility are controlled and monitored, reducing traffic and limiting access points. This layout allows authorities to quickly identify unusual activity, ensuring that any threat is detected long before it reaches the prison gates. In this way, the location of USP Terre Haute is not accidental. It is a calculated element of the prison's design. The land itself becomes part of the security system, shaping every aspect of control, movement, and isolation within the facility. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute operates under the authority of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, placing it within the highest tier of the American correctional system. Unlike state prisons, federal high-security facilities are designed to manage inmates convicted of crimes that threaten national safety, public order, or federal law itself. Terre Haute's classification reflects the extreme level of risk posed by the individuals housed within its walls. The prison's architecture is built around the principle of total control. Thick reinforced concrete walls, steel-reinforced doors, and narrow, controlled corridors limit inmate movement at every stage. Each housing unit is designed to prevent blind spots, ensuring that correctional officers maintain constant visual dominance. The structure itself becomes a tool of authority, leaving little room for resistance or unpredictability. Security at Terre Haute extends far beyond physical barriers. Inmates are subjected to strict classification systems that determine where they live, how they move, and whom they interact with. Every prisoner is assessed based on threat level, criminal history, and behavioral patterns. This layered approach minimizes the possibility of coordinated violence or manipulation within the population. Daily operations follow rigid federal protocols. Meals, recreation, work assignments, and lockdowns occur on precise schedules, reducing opportunities for unrest. Any deviation from routine is treated as a potential threat. This relentless structure creates an environment where control is constant and discipline is enforced without compromise. Correctional officers at USP Terre Haute receive specialized training to handle high-risk inmates. They are prepared for violent confrontations, hostage scenarios, and psychological manipulation. Staff presence is deliberately visible and authoritative, reinforcing the power imbalance between inmates and the institution. In this environment, authority is not negotiated, it is imposed. Technology plays a central role in maintaining security. Motion sensors, surveillance cameras, electronic locking systems, and alarm networks operate continuously. These systems are designed to detect even minor irregularities, ensuring immediate response to potential threats. Human oversight is supported by technology that never rests. Communication within the prison is tightly regulated. Inmate correspondence, phone calls, and visitation are monitored and restricted to prevent the spread of criminal influence beyond the prison walls. This control is especially critical given the presence of inmates linked to organized crime, terrorism, and large-scale violence. As a federal high-security facility, USP Terre Haute represents the final escalation in incarceration. It is a place designed not for rehabilitation, but for containment. Every policy, procedure, and structure exists to neutralize danger, enforce order, and maintain absolute control over those deemed the most dangerous under federal law. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute holds a distinction that separates it from every other federal prison in the country. It is the home of the United States Federal Death Chamber, the only facility where federal executions are carried out. This role places Terre Haute at the center of one of the most controversial and emotionally charged aspects of the American justice system. The decision to locate the federal death chamber at Terre Haute was rooted in security, secrecy, and control. Executions require absolute containment, limited access, and strict procedural oversight. The prison's high security status allows federal authorities to conduct executions away from major population centers, reducing the risk of public unrest, interference, or security breaches. Within the prison, the execution chamber is isolated from the general population. Access is restricted to a small number of authorized personnel, including specially trained correctional officers, medical staff, and federal officials. Every step of the process is governed by detailed protocols, leaving no room for deviation or error. Even within a prison designed for control, this area represents the highest level of restriction. For inmates on federal death row, Terre Haute represents a place where time is measured differently. Their daily existence is defined by waiting, sometimes for years or decades, under the knowledge that this facility is where their sentence will ultimately be carried out. This psychological weight is as powerful as the physical confinement itself. The presence of the death chamber influences the atmosphere of the entire prison. Both staff and inmates are acutely aware of its purpose. For correctional officers, working in a facility responsible for executions carries a heavy emotional and ethical burden. The routine enforcement of security exists alongside the reality of administering the state's most final punishment. Executions at Terre Haute have drawn national and international attention, often reigniting debates about capital punishment, human rights, and the limits of state power. Protesters, legal challenges, and media scrutiny frequently surround scheduled executions, placing the prison under intense public focus despite its isolated location. Security operations are significantly heightened during execution periods. The facility may enter extended lockdowns, movement is restricted, and additional federal personnel are deployed. These measures ensure that the execution process remains insulated from disruption, emphasizing the seriousness of the prison's role. As the home of the federal death chamber, USP Terre Haute is more than a correctional facility. It functions as a place where law, punishment, and mortality intersect, embodying the ultimate authority of the federal justice system over life and death. The execution history of United States Penitentiary Terre Haute is deeply woven into the modern narrative of capital punishment in the United States. Since becoming the official site for federal executions, the prison has witnessed moments that permanently shaped national debate. Each execution carried out within its walls represents not just an individual case, but a broader statement about how far federal authority can extend in delivering punishment. Many of the executions conducted at Terre Haute involved inmates convicted of crimes that shocked the nation. Acts of terrorism, mass murder, and extreme violence placed these individuals under intense public scrutiny long before their final sentences were carried out. As a result, the prison became the physical location where public outrage, legal judgment, and moral controversy converged. The timeline of executions at Terre Haute has not been continuous. Periods of inactivity, often caused by legal challenges or political decisions, were followed by sudden resumption. When executions restarted after long pauses, Terre Haute once again became the focus of national attention, highlighting how shifts in government policy directly affect life and death decisions within the prison. Each execution followed a rigidly documented process, refined over time through legal precedent and procedural changes. From final appeals to last meals and final statements, every detail was carefully recorded. This meticulous approach reflects the federal government's attempt to present executions as controlled, lawful acts rather than emotional or impulsive punishments. The execution history has also exposed operational challenges. Legal disputes over execution methods, drug protocols, and inmate rights repeatedly placed Terre Haute under judicial review. Court orders, last-minute stays, and emergency hearings became part of the prison's operational reality, adding layers of tension to an already severe environment. For prison staff, repeated involvement in executions created a unique psychological burden. Correctional officers, medical personnel, and administrators were required to perform their duties with professionalism while confronting the emotional weight of ending a human life. Over time, Terre Haute developed specialized teams trained specifically for these responsibilities. Outside the prison walls, execution days transformed the surrounding area. Media presence increased, security checkpoints expanded, and protests formed at designated distances. Terre Haute's normally quiet setting became a temporary stage for national and international attention, reinforcing the prison's symbolic importance. Through its execution history, USP Terre Haute became more than a detention facility. It became a record of how federal capital punishment is practiced, paused, challenged, and enforced. Each execution added another chapter to a history that continues to influence legal, political, and ethical discussions across the country. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute is designed to contain individuals considered too dangerous for standard correctional facilities. The inmates housed here are not ordinary offenders. They include terrorists, mass murderers, serial killers, and high-level figures connected to organized crime. Each prisoner represents a significant threat, not only because of their crimes, but because of their capacity for violence, influence, and disruption. Many of the inmates at Terre Haute were convicted in cases that captured national or international attention. Their crimes often involved large numbers of victims, extreme brutality, or ideological motives. As a result, these individuals are viewed as ongoing risks, even while incarcerated. The prison's role is to neutralize that risk by isolating them from society and limiting their ability to communicate or organize. Housing such a population requires constant assessment. Inmates are carefully classified based on behavior, affiliations, and threat level. Those with histories of violence against staff or other inmates are placed under tighter restrictions. The goal is not rehabilitation, but control, ensuring that no single individual can dominate or destabilize the prison environment. The presence of high-profile criminals creates unique security challenges. Some inmates attract attention from outside supporters, extremist groups, or criminal networks. Others become targets within the prison itself. Terre Haute's security structure is designed to prevent these dynamics from escalating into violence or coordinated activity. Isolation plays a central role in managing dangerous inmates. Many prisoners spend long periods in single cells with limited interaction. This separation reduces the likelihood of assaults, gang coordination, or hostage situations. However, it also intensifies the psychological pressure experienced by those confined under such conditions. Staff at Terre Haute must remain constantly alert. Inmates housed here are often highly intelligent, manipulative, and experienced in exploiting weaknesses in authority. Correctional officers are trained to recognize subtle behavioral changes, coded communication, and signs of planning that could indicate an emerging threat. The prison also functions as a containment zone for inmates whose crimes carry symbolic power. Terrorists and mass killers often seek notoriety. Terre Haute's strict media controls and communication restrictions are designed to deny them a platform, limiting their ability to spread ideology or influence beyond the prison walls. By housing America's most dangerous criminals, USP Terre Haute serves a specific purpose within the federal system. It is a facility built to absorb the highest level of risk, ensuring that individuals capable of extreme harm remain completely separated from the society they once terrorized. To United States Penitentiary Terre Haute, surveillance is not just a security feature, it is the foundation of control. Every section of the prison is designed to be observed, recorded, and analyzed. From housing units and corridors to recreation yards and service areas, inmates exist under near-constant watch, creating an environment where privacy is virtually non-existent. High-definition surveillance cameras are positioned to eliminate blind spots. These cameras operate around the clock, capturing every movement and interaction. Control rooms staffed by trained personnel monitor live feeds, while recordings are archived for review. Even minor incidents can be replayed, examined, and used to identify patterns of behavior or potential threats. Surveillance at Terre Haute extends beyond visual monitoring. Motion detectors, electronic door sensors, and alarm systems track movement throughout the facility. Any unauthorized access or irregular activity triggers immediate alerts, allowing staff to respond within seconds. These systems ensure that even in moments when human attention shifts, technology continues to enforce order. The prison's architecture is designed to complement surveillance. Open sightlines, elevated control posts, and strategically placed windows allow officers to maintain visual dominance. This design reduces opportunities for concealment and reinforces the psychological awareness among inmates that they are always being watched. Inmates quickly learn that surveillance influences every aspect of daily life. Conversations are monitored, movements are logged, and interactions are scrutinized. This constant observation discourages planning, coordination, or acts of violence. Over time, surveillance becomes an invisible authority, shaping behavior through awareness rather than direct force. Correctional officers rely heavily on surveillance data to assess risk. Patterns such as repeated cell pacing, unusual gathering attempts, or changes in routine can indicate rising tension or planning. Early detection allows staff to intervene before situations escalate into violence or unrest. During high-risk periods, such as inmate transfers or execution-related operations, surveillance intensity increases. Additional monitoring teams are deployed, and sensitive areas are placed under heightened observation. These measures ensure that critical moments pass without incident, reinforcing the prison's reputation for absolute control. At USP Terre Haute, surveillance is more than technology. It is a strategy. By removing secrecy and unpredictability, the prison neutralizes threats before they form, maintaining dominance over one of the most dangerous inmate populations in the federal system. Death row at United States Penitentiary Terre Haute represents the most extreme form of confinement within the federal prison system. Inmates sentenced to death are housed under conditions designed to eliminate risk, control behavior, and enforce complete separation from the general prison population. Isolation is not incidental here. It is policy. Prisoners on death row spend the majority of their time alone in small, reinforced cells. Contact with other inmates is minimal or non-existent, and movement outside the cell is tightly scheduled and supervised. Even routine activities such as exercise, showers, or medical visits are conducted under strict controls, often with physical restraints. This level of isolation serves multiple purposes. From a security standpoint, it prevents violence, suicide attempts, and coordinated disruptions. Death row inmates often have nothing to lose, making them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Isolation reduces opportunities for impulsive or desperate actions that could threaten staff or other prisoners. The psychological impact of death row isolation is severe. Days blend into weeks, and weeks into years, with little variation or stimulation. Inmates exist in a state of suspended time, aware that their execution date may be scheduled or delayed without warning. The absence of meaningful human interaction amplifies stress, anxiety, and mental deterioration. Communication with the outside world is heavily restricted. Visits, when permitted, occur under strict supervision and physical separation. Phone calls and written correspondence are monitored, limiting emotional support from family or legal representatives. This controlled communication reinforces the sense of total separation from normal life. For prison staff, managing death row requires constant vigilance. Officers are trained to monitor signs of psychological collapse, self-harm, or aggression. Every interaction is documented, and even small changes in inmate behavior are taken seriously, as mental instability can escalate rapidly in isolation. Death row isolation also reflects the symbolic role of the sentence itself. The separation marks these inmates as distinct, reinforcing the finality of their punishment. They are physically and psychologically removed from the prison community, existing in a space defined by anticipation rather than rehabilitation. Within USP Terre Haute, death row stands as a controlled environment where time, movement, and human contact are tightly regulated. It is a place where isolation becomes both a security tool and a form of punishment, shaping the daily reality of those awaiting the ultimate sentence. Life inside United States Penitentiary Terre Haute exerts relentless psychological pressure on those confined within its walls. The combination of extreme security, constant surveillance, and prolonged isolation creates an environment where mental strain becomes unavoidable. For many inmates, the prison is not only a place of physical confinement, but a setting that steadily erodes psychological stability. The rigid routine imposed on inmates is designed to eliminate unpredictability, yet it also strips away personal agency. Every action, when to wake, eat, move, or sleep, is dictated by authority. Over time, this loss of control can lead to feelings of helplessness, frustration, and emotional numbness, particularly among inmates serving long or indefinite sentences. Isolation intensifies these effects. Limited human interaction deprives inmates of social connection, a fundamental psychological need. Conversations are brief, monitored, and often transactional. Without meaningful engagement, many prisoners experience heightened anxiety, depression, and difficulty maintaining a sense of identity. For death row inmates, the psychological burden is even greater. Living with the constant awareness of an impending execution creates a unique form of stress. The uncertainty of timing, knowing the sentence is final but the date may change, traps inmates in a prolonged state of anticipation, which can be more damaging than certainty itself. The omnipresence of surveillance reinforces this mental strain. Being watched at all times eliminates privacy and fosters a persistent sense of exposure. Inmates learn to self-censor their behavior, movements, and even emotions, knowing that any action can be recorded and interpreted. This constant self-monitoring can lead to paranoia and emotional withdrawal. Correctional staff are also affected by the psychological environment. Officers regularly interact with inmates convicted of extreme violence, and the high-stress nature of the facility demands emotional detachment. Over time, this can result in burnout, desensitization, or moral conflict, particularly for those assigned to death row units. Mental health services exist within the prison, but their role is limited by security priorities. Treatment often focuses on risk management rather than rehabilitation or long-term recovery. Severe mental health issues may be stabilized, but rarely resolved, within such a restrictive setting. At USP Terre Haute, psychological impact is an unspoken consequence of extreme incarceration. The prison's design prioritizes control and security, but in doing so, it creates a mental environment where stress, isolation, and emotional decline become a constant reality for those who live and work inside. At United States Penitentiary Terre Haute, the concept of error is treated as a direct threat to security. Housing some of the most dangerous inmates in the federal system leaves no room for misjudgment, hesitation, or procedural failure. Every operation, from routine cell checks to high-risk movements, is governed by strict rules designed to prevent even the smallest lapse. Security protocols are layered and redundant. If one system fails, another immediately takes its place. Physical barriers, electronic surveillance, and human oversight operate simultaneously, ensuring that no single point of failure can compromise the facility. This redundancy reflects an understanding that a minor oversight could escalate into violence, escape, or loss of life. Staff at Terre Haute operate under constant pressure to maintain precision. Correctional officers follow detailed procedures for inmate counts, searches, and escorts. Deviating from protocol is not tolerated, as consistency is essential to predicting and controlling inmate behavior. In a prison where many inmates have nothing to lose, predictability becomes a critical defense. Inmate movement is treated as a high-risk operation. Transfers between cells, medical units, or visitation areas are carefully planned and executed with multiple officers present. Routes are secured in advance, doors are electronically controlled, and timing is synchronized to prevent unexpected encounters or opportunities for attack. Emergency response planning is another area where there is no margin for error. The prison conducts regular drills for riots, medical emergencies, and hostage situations. Staff are trained to respond immediately and decisively, understanding that delayed action could allow a situation to spiral beyond control. The execution process itself reflects this zero-error philosophy. From legal verification to physical preparation, each step is reviewed multiple times by different authorities. The weight of irreversible consequences demands absolute accuracy, reinforcing the culture of caution that defines the prison. Inmates are acutely aware of this environment. The knowledge that every action is monitored and that rules are enforced without exception discourages impulsive behavior. Any sign of defiance or manipulation is addressed swiftly, reinforcing the institution's authority. At USP Terre Haute, perfection is not an ideal, it is a requirement. The absence of a margin for error defines daily life, shaping decisions, movements, and interactions in a facility where a single mistake could carry catastrophic consequences. Daily life at United States Penitentiary Terre Haute is governed by an unyielding routine designed to maintain order and suppress unpredictability. From the moment inmates wake to the moment lights are turned off, every activity follows a predetermined schedule. This rigid structure is not simply administrative. It is a deliberate security strategy. Meals are served at fixed times, movement between areas is carefully coordinated, and recreation periods are strictly limited. Inmates do not choose when to eat, exercise, or rest. This control over time reduces opportunities for planning violence, coordinating with others, or exploiting gaps in supervision. Routine becomes a form of discipline. Counts are conducted multiple times throughout the day and night. These head counts ensure that every inmate is accounted for at all times. Sudden counts can occur without warning, reinforcing the idea that surveillance and control are constant. Any discrepancy triggers immediate lockdowns and investigations. Work assignments and programs, when permitted, operate under close supervision. Inmates allowed to participate are carefully selected and monitored. Tools, materials, and movement are strictly regulated to prevent misuse. Even productive activity is shaped by security considerations rather than personal development. Recreation, often one of the few breaks from confinement, is tightly controlled. In many cases, inmates exercise alone or in small, carefully selected groups. Equipment is minimal, and interactions are monitored. The goal is to allow physical movement without creating opportunities for conflict or alliance building. For staff, enforcing this routine requires consistency and vigilance. Officers must ensure schedules are followed precisely, knowing that deviations can create confusion or tension. Routine provides staff with predictability as well, allowing them to anticipate inmate behavior and maintain control. Psychologically, the controlled routine reinforces the institution's authority. Over time, inmates internalize the schedule, measuring life in repeated cycles rather than personal milestones. Days become indistinguishable, emphasizing the loss of autonomy that defines incarceration at this level. At USP Terre Haute, routine is more than order. It is power. By controlling time itself, the prison limits resistance, reduces risk, and maintains dominance over an inmate population defined by extreme danger. Communication inside United States Penitentiary Terre Haute is treated as a potential security threat. In a facility housing some of the most dangerous criminals in the federal system, unrestricted contact with the outside world could allow the continuation of criminal activity, the spread of extremist ideology, or the coordination of violence. As a result, every form of communication is tightly controlled. Inmate phone calls are limited in frequency and duration, and all calls are monitored and recorded. Conversations are analyzed for coded language, hidden messages, or signs of manipulation. Even personal calls to family members are subject to scrutiny, reinforcing the idea that no communication is truly private within the prison. Written correspondence is also closely regulated. Incoming and outgoing mail is screened, inspected, and in some cases, delayed or rejected. Letters are examined for contraband, coded instructions, or content deemed threatening to security. This process significantly slows communication, weakening outside connections and reducing the inmate's influence beyond prison walls. Visitation is among the most restricted forms of contact. Visits often take place behind glass partitions, with physical contact prohibited. Schedules are limited, approval processes are strict, and visits can be revoked for minor infractions. For many inmates, seeing loved ones becomes a rare and emotionally controlled event. Legal communication, while protected, is still conducted under structured conditions. Meetings with attorneys occur in designated areas and follow strict procedures to ensure safety. Even here, movement to and from legal visits is heavily supervised, reflecting the prison's priority on control over convenience. The restriction of communication has a profound psychological effect. Isolation from family, friends, and society reinforces feelings of abandonment and disconnection. Over time, inmates may lose social skills, emotional expression, and a sense of belonging, deepening the mental strain of incarceration. From a security standpoint, limited communication reduces the risk of organized crime networks operating from inside the prison. It prevents inmates from directing activities on the outside, coordinating protests, or influencing public narratives about their crimes or sentences. At USP Terre Haute, silence is a tool of control. By restricting communication, the prison severs dangerous connections, reinforces isolation, and ensures that the power of influence ends at the prison gates. The security of United States Penitentiary Terre Haute depends not only on walls and technology, but on the people who enforce its rules. Correctional officers assigned to this facility are among the most highly trained in the federal system. They are selected and prepared to work in an environment where the risk of violence, manipulation, and psychological stress is constant. Training for staff goes far beyond basic correctional duties. Officers are instructed in crisis intervention, use of force protocols, hostage response, and emergency containment. They are trained to respond quickly and decisively to incidents involving inmates who may act without warning or restraint. Precision and discipline are emphasized, as hesitation can have serious consequences. Staff are also trained to recognize psychological manipulation. Many inmates at Terre Haute are experienced in exploiting weaknesses, using intimidation, deception, or emotional pressure to gain advantage. Officers learn to maintain professional distance, follow procedures strictly, and avoid personal engagement that could compromise authority. Team coordination is a critical element of staff training. Officers rarely operate alone during high-risk activities. Movement, searches, and emergency responses rely on clear communication and coordinated action. This teamwork ensures that no individual officer becomes vulnerable or isolated in a volatile situation. The presence of death row and the federal execution chamber adds another layer of responsibility. Staff assigned to these areas receive specialized training to handle sensitive operations with professionalism and restraint. Emotional control is essential, as officers must carry out their duties while managing the moral weight associated with capital punishment. Mental resilience is as important as physical readiness. Working daily in an environment defined by danger and finality can take a psychological toll. Officers are trained to manage stress, remain alert during long shifts, and recognize signs of burnout in themselves and their colleagues. Strict adherence to protocol defines staff culture at Terre Haute. Rules are enforced consistently to prevent inmates from exploiting inconsistencies. This predictability strengthens authority and reinforces the structure necessary to manage a high-risk population. At USP Terre Haute, highly trained staff form the human backbone of security. Their discipline, awareness, and coordination transform policy into practice, ensuring that control is maintained in one of America's most dangerous prisons. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute has long stood at the center of intense legal and ethical controversy. As the home of the federal death chamber, the prison is directly linked to debates that question the limits of state power, human rights, and the morality of capital punishment. Every execution carried out within its walls reignites these national and international discussions. Legal challenges surrounding executions at Terre Haute have been frequent and complex. Inmates and advocacy groups have repeatedly filed last-minute appeals, questioning execution methods, drug protocols, and constitutional protections. These legal battles often place the prison at the intersection of court rulings, political decisions, and public opinion, turning it into a focal point of judicial tension. Ethical concerns extend beyond the act of execution itself. Critics argue that prolonged death row confinement amounts to psychological torture, while supporters maintain it is a necessary component of justice for extreme crimes. Terre Haute becomes the physical space where these opposing views collide, embodying the unresolved moral conflict within the American legal system. The secrecy surrounding execution procedures has also drawn scrutiny. Limited public access, restricted information, and controlled media presence raise questions about transparency and accountability. While authorities argue that secrecy ensures security and dignity, critics see it as a barrier to public oversight. Medical ethics are another area of controversy. The involvement of medical personnel in executions challenges traditional medical principles centered on preserving life. Professional organizations have raised concerns about the role healthcare workers play in a process designed to end life, placing Terre Haute at the center of these ethical debates. International attention has further amplified controversy. Human rights organizations and foreign governments have criticized federal executions, especially when inmates are foreign nationals or when execution methods are disputed. As the site where these sentences are carried out, Terre Haute becomes a symbol of American capital punishment on the global stage. Political shifts directly affect the prison's role. Changes in federal leadership can halt or resume executions, turning Terre Haute into a reflection of broader political priorities. These shifts create periods of uncertainty that affect inmates, staff, and the legal system alike. Within this context, USP Terre Haute exists as more than a prison. It functions as a legal and ethical battleground, where questions of justice, punishment, and human dignity remain unresolved, and where each action carries implications far beyond its walls. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute has become a powerful symbol of final punishment within the American justice system. Its identity is inseparable from the concept of irreversible sentencing, representing the ultimate authority of the federal government to impose the most severe consequences allowed by law. For many, the name Terre Haute itself evokes finality rather than incarceration. For inmates sentenced to death, the prison is not merely a place of confinement, but the final destination in a long legal journey. Years of trials, appeals, and court decisions culminate here. The physical presence of the execution chamber transforms the abstract idea of punishment into a concrete reality, reinforcing the sense that there is no path forward beyond this point. This symbolism extends beyond death row. Even inmates not facing execution understand that Terre Haute represents the highest level of federal punishment. Being transferred to this facility signals that an individual has reached the most severe end of the correctional spectrum, where security overrides rehabilitation and containment replaces reform. The prison's role as a symbol is also reflected in public perception. Media coverage of executions and high-profile inmates has cemented Terre Haute's reputation as a place where justice reaches its absolute limit. For supporters of capital punishment, it stands as evidence of accountability and deterrence. For critics, it embodies the moral cost of irreversible state power. Within the facility, this symbolism influences behavior. Inmates are acutely aware of where they are and what the prison represents. The weight of final punishment shapes daily life, reinforcing compliance and reducing resistance. The environment itself communicates authority without the need for constant force. Staff working at Terre Haute also operate under this symbolic weight. Enforcing rules and maintaining security in a prison defined by final outcomes requires emotional discipline. Officers are not only managing inmates, but also upholding the institution's role in carrying out the most serious sentences in federal law. The symbolism of final punishment extends into legal and political discourse. Every decision involving Terre Haute, whether to resume executions or halt them, carries national significance. The prison becomes a reference point in debates about justice, punishment, and the power of the state. In this way, USP Terre Haute stands as more than a physical structure. It exists as a symbol of final judgment, where law, authority, and irreversible consequence converge under the authority of the federal justice system. United States Penitentiary Terre Haute has built a legacy defined by fear and absolute control. Over decades, its reputation has extended far beyond its walls, shaping how inmates, law enforcement, and the public perceive the highest level of federal incarceration. This legacy functions as an invisible force, influencing behavior even before an individual arrives at the facility. For inmates, the mere possibility of being sent to Terre Haute carries psychological weight. Within the federal prison system, its name is spoken with caution, associated with extreme isolation, relentless surveillance, and final punishment. This reputation alone acts as a deterrent, reinforcing compliance in other institutions and reminding offenders of the consequences of escalation. Control at Terre Haute is not chaotic or violent. It is methodical. Every aspect of life is regulated, from movement and communication to time and space. This precision creates an environment where fear is sustained not through brutality, but through certainty. Inmates understand that resistance is futile, and unpredictability is quickly neutralized. The prison's legacy is also shaped by its role in federal executions. As the site where the ultimate sentence is carried out, Terre Haute embodies the state's most powerful authority. This association strengthens its image as a place where justice is enforced without reversal, deepening its psychological impact on those inside and outside the system. Staff contribute to this legacy through strict professionalism and consistency. Rules are applied uniformly, and authority is never negotiated. This consistency reinforces the prison's control, preventing inmates from exploiting weakness or inconsistency. Over time, this culture becomes self-sustaining. Public awareness, fueled by media coverage and legal controversy, has further cemented Terre Haute's image. Each high-profile execution or court case renews attention, reminding society of the prison's unique role. The facility becomes a symbol referenced in discussions of crime, punishment, and state power. Even the physical design of the prison reinforces its legacy. Solid walls, controlled access points, and surveillance infrastructure communicate dominance and permanence. The environment itself conveys the message that this is a place designed to outlast resistance. Through fear, structure, and unwavering control, USP Terre Haute has established a lasting legacy. It stands as a reminder of the most extreme measures within the justice system, where authority is absolute and the consequences are final.